expressed on the following program are those of the host and not necessarily those of staff, management, or ownership.
Arizona, Phoenix, Brother Mike, Maricopa County. I'm back on the radio. Welcome to HardcoreChristianity.com. Thank you for your time. Thank you for tuning in. Today's study, homosexual priest research study. Came out last week. This you've got to hear. This is something you've got to hear. Hey, welcome to the radio program. This is Brother Mike. I am the professional counselor at the Arizona Deliverance Center in Central Phoenix. We're on 15th Avenue, just south of Osborne Road. The website is hardcorechristianity.com. When you go there, you can see all of our ministry services. We have 2 live services every week, Thursday nights, 7 p.m., Friday nights, 7 p.m. All the services are streamed live on our YouTube teaching channel. We also have monthly free seminars. You can sign up for a free seminar off the website. You can catch the radio archives of all my other radio shows. You can also hit the PayPal button again. And thank you so much for sending your donations in. And don't forget about Sister Karen. She's on the front page of the website. She's ready to list your home for you and sell it with integrity and honesty. Praise the Lord. Today's study, homosexual priests. Did you happen to see this? It came out about a week or so ago. It says a new report dares to ask the question to those in authority in the Catholic Church: is there a correlation between the presence of a high proportion of homosexuals in the priesthood and the incidence of clergy sex abuse? That's a question that has been asked for decades, possibly centuries. I've always known the answer to it, but it's nice that somebody actually researched it and put some actual evidence behind it. Quote, the report also examines how homosexual subcultures within Catholic seminaries may have contributed to creating an environment where homosexual clergy were more likely to abuse minors. Before we get started with the research, let me once again mention, I've mentioned it several times before, you know, in my experience, there's a difference between Catholics and Roman Catholicism. A Roman Catholic can be different from a Catholic. Catholicism is similar to Protestantism in that it's set up or separated into subgroups. Protestantism is set up into subgroups: Lutherans, Episcopals, Methodists. You know, there's over 60 different Baptist church type denominations. There's over 18 Pentecostal denominations. Well, Catholicism is very similar. There's a lot of subgroups in Catholicism, and there isn't any uniform beliefs in many of these groups. They all have different beliefs, just like Protestants. And child sexual abuse is something that Roman Catholicism tolerates and won't do anything about. But the vast majority of Catholics are opposed to child sex abuse and don't want anything to do with it, literally. So you've got to understand that the Vatican is different than the Catholics. Roman Catholicism is different in many respects than Catholics. The report goes on to say, quote, although over 8 in 10 victims have been boys, the idea that the abuse is related to homosexual men in the priesthood has not been widely accepted by church leaders, wrote Father Paul Sullins, a retired Catholic University of America sociology professor. A new report came out from the Ruth Institute researching this concept. Quote, the data shows that more homosexual men in the priesthood was correlated with more overall abuse and more boys abused compared to girls. The title of this report, if you want to look it up, is Catholic Clergy Sex Abuse Related to Homosexual Priests? That's the name of the research article. Well, obviously, for centuries or millenniums or what have you, people have always wondered about Roman Catholicism. Why does it seem that there's more boys sexually abused than girls? Duh. Let me think about that for a minute, because that's one of the things that make you go, let's think about that for a minute. Why would the system require more sexually abused boys than girls? Could it be that the priests are homosexual? Huh. Quote, the priest said in a recent press conference that the question comes up logically because the vast majority of priestly sex abuse victims were boys. Normally, in sex abuse of minors in society, 2/3 of the victims are girls. So you see, you have the reversal in Roman Catholicism than you have in our society. You would expect it to be similar, but it's the reverse, and significantly reversed. According to this article, it's something like 80% of the victims in the church, 85%, something like that, are boys, not girls. Quote, the report compares previously unexamined measures of the share of homosexual Catholic priests and the incidence and victim gender of minor sex abuse by Catholic priests from 1950 to 2001 to see if these matters are related. The research findings are stunning, the report says. The share of homosexual men in the priesthood rose from 2 times that of the general population in the 1950s to 8 times the general population in the 1980s. This trend was strongly correlated with increasing child sexual abuse. Translation: in the 1950s, most of the priests were heterosexual. In the 1980s, it had flipped, and 80% of the priests were homosexual. Thereabouts, approximately. Quote, 1/4 of the priests ordained in the late 60s report the existence of a homosexual subculture in their seminary. 1/4 of them. It rose to over 50% in the 1980s. There was a homosexual subculture in the seminary. So you see, the problem with child sex abuse in the church is that they don't stop it at the beginning. The start of it is the seminaries, where they have these subcultures of gay priests. This trend, it says in the article, was strongly correlated with increasing child sex abuse cases. 4 out of 5 victims over the age were boys. Only 1 in 5 were girls. Ease of access to boys relative to girls accounts for about 1/5 of the disparity. The number of homosexual priests account for the remaining 4/5. The article says that estimates of these findings predict that had the proportion of homosexual priests remained at the 1950s level, there would have been 12,000 fewer children molested since then. Can you imagine that? There's a direct correlation statistically with the number of gay priests going up and with the number of child sex abuse cases going up. Quote, when you get up to 16% of priests that are homosexual, you've got 8 times the proportion of homosexuals as you do in the general population. And it's as if the priesthood becomes a particularly welcoming and enabling and encouraging population for homosexual activity and behavior, he added. Can you imagine making a statement like that? The seminaries, the Catholic seminaries, are welcoming and enabling and encouraging the population of homosexual priests to engage in homosexual activity and behavior, which leads to the children being sexually abused. Other studies have been done over the years. For example, John Jay College of Criminal Justice did a study in 2004. And it revealed that since 1950, over 10,000 children, mostly boys, had been abused by approximately 4,000 Catholic priests. But there was a new pattern of resistance noted in that survey. The bishops were covering up the sins. The real problem is the subculture in the seminaries and the bishops who allow the gay priests to molest the children, and then they cover it up and transfer them to another parish. The Catholic Church, since 2002, imposed new standards, and fortunately it led to the removal of hundreds of priests and bishops specifically, but the bishops specifically excluded themselves from the child protection measures. Why? Well, in their opinion, only the Pope had authority to discipline them. So they didn't fall under the new rules. They called it fraternal correction. The fraternal correction did not keep them in line because the bishops were not subject to it. There was also other research surveys done. The Los Angeles Times did one in 2002. The question was, in the seminary you attended, was there a homosexual subculture? And 1 out of 4 responded with yes. And for recent graduates, the number skyrocketed to over 50%. Over 2 out of 4 said there was a subculture of homosexuality in this training of priests. Can you imagine that? Dean Hogg also did a survey several years ago, and the figure was 55%. What's going on here? Lust demons get into the system. The Roman Catholicism is loaded with lust spirits because they allow homosexuals into the priesthood. The homosexuals cannot stay celibate because of their powerful sex drives, and so they move to the victim closest to them, a child. If you were molested by someone in the Catholic Church, you are eligible for free counseling and deliverance services at the Arizona Deliverance Center. I worked with many Catholics over the years and have seen many of them delivered. 602-636-5800. See you next time.
The views expressed on this program are those of the host and not necessarily those of staff, management, or ownership. This program was sponsored by Michael W. Smith.